The number is 30, not 50 like the Italian press wrote. Not the half-second miracle the rumors promised. 30 horsepower. That figure came out of Aston Martin's own data less than a week after the Hungarian Grand Prix, and in this video you'll understand why a number that sounds like a disappointment might be the most important admission Honda has made all season, why Mike Krack is refusing to promise anything for Zandvoort, and why one 45-year-old Spaniard is reading every line of this story before he signs anything. Because there's a question hanging over all of it, and I want your answer at the end. Is this actually new information? Or just the first honest number in a season full of noise? Follow the timeline because the order matters more than the headlines did. Sunday, the Hungarian Grand Prix ends. Lance Stroll crosses the line 13th, his best result of the season, with Fernando Alonso right behind him in 14th, modest on paper. Enormous for a team that spent most of 2026 as the slowest car on the grid. Tuesday, the team stays at the Hungaroring, but wheels out the old car, the original season opening chassis, because Pirelli is running a tire test for next year's compounds with Aston Martin, Audi, and Alpine, and the older car gives Pirelli a cleaner baseline. Wednesday, 3 days after the race, everything changes. The team runs a filming day, and instead of shooting a promo video, they use it to shake down Honda's upgraded power unit for the very first time. Jack Crawford, the team's third driver, puts roughly 200 kilometers on the new engine inside the upgraded chassis. It happens to be Alonso's 45th birthday. Most people get a cake. Alonso got a dataset, and once that dataset was lined up against what the original engine produced at the race weekend, the team's own internal estimate landed at around 30 horsepower. The conservative end of everything that had been floated publicly. That's the admission. That's what came out. If you want the stories behind the press releases, instead of the press releases themselves, subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me which country you're watching from, because how you read this number depends a lot on which team you grew up watching. Now, before we weigh that number, understand who put the honest version on the record. Shintaro Orihara is not a spokesman. He is Honda's trackside general manager and chief engineer, the man who sees the dyno results from Japan before anyone in the paddock does. He has said openly that he knows the exact figure from the dyno testing and that he is not allowed to share it. But he gave us the frame. His words, "We are aiming to get a reasonable big step rather than bring a small step. But I would say there is no magic in Formula One. I don't think we're going to catch up to Mercedes or Red Bull by one step." Read that again. The man with the number in his pocket chose the phrase, "no magic." And Mike Krack, the team boss, backed him up with a warning of his own about the first race back. His words, "I don't expect we will be straight away on it in FP1. It might even take us a couple of sessions to get the maximum out of it." Two senior men, same message, delivered on the record while everyone else was shouting about 50 horsepower. So let's interrogate the official story, question by question. Is this a whole new engine? No. Orihara explained that every change is internal. The outside dimensions don't move, which means the chassis doesn't have to change to accept it. What's actually different? Three things. The shape of the main combustion chamber, the pre-chamber, and the piston itself, plus work on the lubrication system to cut friction. Is that risky? Yes, and the material is blunt about it. Reshaping a piston is a normal way to chase performance, but it sits among the riskier moves for reliability, because small changes to how fuel burns only reveal their problems under sustained load. Did the shakedown survive? It did. 200 kilometers, data collected, nothing broke, step 1 complete. And here's where the paperwork matters, because none of this happens without a rule with a name. The mechanism is called ADUO, Additional Design and Upgrade Opportunities, a 2026 provision that lets a manufacturer upgrade if its engine falls too far behind the benchmark. When the FIA measured the grid at the start of the season, the Red Bull Ford unit was the strongest, and the Honda in the back of the Aston Martin was the weakest, more than 4% off the reference. That gap earned Honda 2 permitted upgrades across this season and next. They are spending the first one at Zandvoort. Keep that in mind. This upgrade exists because a governing body formally certified this engine as the worst on the grid. That's not spin, that's the written record. Now put two versions of this story side by side, because this is where it turns. Version 1 lived in the build-up. Some Italian journalists claimed the new engine would bring 50 extra horsepower. Other rumors priced it at half a second a lap. Honda's own press appearances carried a noticeably more optimistic tone. Version 2 arrived on Wednesday evening in the team's own comparison data, around 30 horsepower, with Orihara's reasonable step language sitting next to it. Neither version accuses the other of lying, but you cannot hold both at once. And the gap between what was promised in public and what was measured in private tells you the team itself does not expect this step to close the distance to the front. That gap is the story, not the engine. So here's your vote, and I want it in the comments. Is this actually new or just finally admitted? Like this video if the 30 figure changed your read on Aston Martin's season. Comment if you'd already assumed it, and if you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of story you'll want to be here for when the real number surfaces. Let's turn the number into consequences, because 30 horsepower on its own means nothing. Using the estimate circulating before the test, a gain in the 30 to 50 horsepower range translates to roughly half a second a lap on the straights, through acceleration and top speed. A new gearbox arrives alongside it, aimed at drivability rather than raw pace, and the team expects that piece alone to be worth another 2 or 3 tenths by smoothing the shifts. Stack it on top of the chassis package from Hungary, 16 new parts, a new nose, a new floor, serious weight taken out, and the team's own numbers put that chassis gain somewhere between 1.5 seconds and 2 seconds. Add it all up and you get a car that could be close to a second faster again once it's properly optimized, which, by the team's own admission, it is not. They have had roughly 2.5 days total of running to find a setup window for an entirely new aerodynamic package. Every gain reported so far came from a rough draft. And there's a quote from earlier this season that reads very differently now. When the partnership was at its worst, when Alonso was saying he couldn't run more than 25 laps without risking nerve damage in his hands because the engine vibrated so badly, Crack described what happened behind closed doors. His words, "It's easy to point the finger, but we sat together and we said, we're in this together. We need to work hard to get out of it together. Believe me, it was tough. Back then, that sounded like damage control." Today, with a working upgrade delivered through the exact legal mechanism designed for a struggling manufacturer, it sounds like a plan that held. He wasn't calming the room. He was describing the rescue while it was happening. Which brings us to the structure underneath all of this, because information like Wednesday's number never arrives by accident, and it never arrives evenly. Honda split its engineering staff at Sakura into 2 separate groups. One finished this upgrade for August. The other is already building the fully redesigned engine for 2027, when the regulations shift again, with more fuel flow and less battery energy, and Honda reportedly moving toward combustion solutions closer to what Mercedes and Red Bull run today. So the conservative number serves a purpose. A modest promise for this year protects the bigger promise for next year. Under promise at Zandvoort, and every 10th found becomes proof the project works. Over-promise, and one bad Friday becomes a crisis. The audience for that calculation is not you. It's the man whose contract expires at the end of 2026. Because Fernando Alonso has said he'll decide his future during this summer break. And Adrian Newey, now leading the technical side, has said Alonso wants to see clear, tangible progress. Not promises. Progress he can measure. Now look at what's been placed on the table in the space of 1 month. A chassis worth up to 2 seconds, an engine step measured, not rumored, at 30 horsepower, a gearbox worth 2 or 3 tenths, and confirmed further upgrades already scheduled for Zandvoort, Monza, and Baku. Alonso himself has described the upgraded car as feeling like a restart to the championship. Keep that phrase in mind. It comes back. Now the Steel Man? Because the other side of this argument deserves its best version. Aston Martin sits 10th in the Constructors' Championship with a single point scored at Monaco after penalties further up the order opened the door, 10 points behind Williams. Antonelli is leading the championship for Mercedes. Norris is winning races for McLaren. The front of the grid is not half a second away. It is miles away. And Honda's own history cuts both ways. The astonishing recovery of 2020 and 2021, but also the genuine struggles of 2017 and 2018. A skeptic can fairly say that 30 horsepower moves this team from last to a fight with Alpine Racing Bulls and Audi, and nothing more. That is a defensible position. It's also not the question that matters this month, because the person this upgrade has to convince isn't chasing the championship. He's deciding whether the direction is real. What comes next is the part that connects it all, and it's the reason this video exists. Before I give it to you, subscribe. Because this story has a scheduled second half, and it lands the moment that engine runs in anger at Zandvoort. Here's the verdict. This engine was not built to beat Mercedes. Orihara told you that himself, in plain words, and the internal number confirms it. This engine was built to prove a sentence true. We're in this together. The 30 horsepower matters less than where it came from, a partnership that nearly broke in the spring, using a rule earned by being certified the worst on the grid, delivering a measured, verified step instead of a rumor. That is what tangible progress looks like to a man who has seen every version of a struggling team across 2 decades. The upgrade is the contract offer. Zandvoort is the signature page. And the honest question, the one I can't answer and won't pretend to, does 30 horsepower on a dyno sheet survive contact with a real race weekend? On a twisty, banked, medium downforce circuit that punished this engine's drivability all year? Nothing in Wednesday's data settles that. 200 kilometers on an empty circuit is not 26 race weekends. It's not proven, and I'm not going to pretend it is. Here's what's still open, stated once and clearly. The exact dyno figure remains sealed in Japan. The reliability of a reshaped piston under sustained racing load is untested. And Alonso has not signed anything. Zandvoort is next, the first race after the break, and it answers all 3 at once. The engine makes its competitive debut, further chassis parts arrive at the same event, and somewhere in that garage a decision about 2027 gets closer to made. Just like the Hungary upgrade story showed us, the parts are only half the news. The people deciding around them are the rest. So tell me, does Honda's conservative number hold at Zandvoort? Or does this engine surprise everyone under real racing pressure? Predict it in the comments, the like button is your ballot, and when the second half of this story lands, and it will, you'll want to be here. Until the next one.